as our job is sort of to be more stakeholder outreach and sort of help provide support to agencies like DEEP and DOT and other agencies, we're going to let the lead on this project actually do the talking, and that's DEEP. We're joined by a fantastic team. We are lucky. This is all starting to come together, and as an observer, I'm just so excited about what the promise and potential is for broadband in Connecticut. There is an RFI out on the street. We need to have responses back to that RFI on August 26th. The reason that we're asking for your input and thoughts about how broadband should be deployed in Connecticut is we want to, DEEP wants to put together a program that you want, that you'll participate in, that you'll be a player in, and DEEP can't do that if we don't hear from you. So this is, if I leave you with any thought here before I turn it over to Commissioner Dykes and her team, I just want to tell you that you got to respond to this stuff. Don't forget, I was a mayor too. I know how busy everybody is, and you're filling potholes and doing all the stuff you have to do. But at the end of the day, we really want to hear from you so that the program that's designed and put in place is what you want to see here in the state of Connecticut. So I'm going to turn it over now to our Commissioner of Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Katie Dykes. She's awesome, outstanding, does a great job for us. I tell you, when I watch her social, I get pumped up about going to a park or going to visit or seeing what's happening in the energy sector or different areas that DEEP oversees. So it's great here. We also have Victoria Hackett with us, aka Vicky, as well as Kevin Pizzacich, who is also assisting us on broadband from the DEEP team. So, Commissioner, your show. We got the slides all set, ready to go, and thank you for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowden, and we're so fortunate to have you, working with us at the state level. I know as a former mayor, you often are reinforcing for us, how important it is to work with municipalities, and I know how municipalities are really, stretched thin. You've got a lot on your plate because I know just the number of things that DEEP is talking with you about and working with you on, and that tires me out. So I can only imagine, how you all are handling all of these opportunities. So, broadband is something you're going to hear a lot of numbers in our presentations. Because of the leadership in Washington, what we've seen in terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have some really transformative federal funding that is newly available for the critical infrastructure that our communities need for connectivity and economic development. And but key to getting this money deployed effectively and in a way that's really going to make a difference for our communities and for future generations and the economic competitiveness and addressing equity in our state and tackling the digital divide is that we deploy these dollars wisely. And that means working very closely with municipal leaders on making sure that we have the best approach to how to spend these dollars that matches the different needs of different communities and can prioritize, job creation and workforce development and making sure that we're, spending these dollars in a way that is efficient and appropriately works with industry in this space, but also ensures that we have a model that's going to reach all of the businesses and residents that have been left behind in terms of access to broadband. So that's where you come in. I'm hoping we can. We have a presentation that you're going to hear from Vicky and from Kevin. To walk through what this funding opportunity looks like and the kinds of input that we're looking for. But I hope we'll also have a chance for some Q&A and to hear from you all about how you're considering this opportunity, what you need, how you'd like to engage, or any challenges or barriers that you're facing to getting involved. That's the spirit of this, starting off with a request for information. This is a critical window of time for us to hear from communities about what you need so we can make sure we're crafting our funding opportunities to be able to work efficiently and effectively. I do have to give the governor, a lot of credit here. Obviously, during the pandemic, when we're dealing with, working from home, remote learning, the access to connectivity to broadband was just so stark in terms of how it was affecting people's ability to weather the pandemic. And coming out of that, the governor prioritized support for broadband initiatives in the American Rescue Plan with ARPA funding, and also worked with the legislature to establish staffing and programs within our federal agencies to help to spur the adoption of broadband. And so with that, we were able to build out our broadband office at DEEP. We're also partnering with the Office of Consumer Counsel and with OPM on other aspects of our broadband program. But we know that deploying, making a difference in terms of infrastructure and getting projects deployed is not just about having the right number of zeros in terms of federal funding, but having the people and the resources available to deliver it. And so we've built this team. We're hoping to expand it further. And I just have to, really praise our acting deputy, Vicki Hackett, and Kevin Pasakich, who's joined us as the office director of our broadband office. They're working around the clock to, get this program going, get these dollars moving. And we're here to be partners with all of you. So with that little speech and getting us excited, I want to turn it over to Kevin and Vicki to walk us through the program, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're so excited about launching programs to ensure everyone has equitable access to broadband in the state of Connecticut, and excited to see all of you on this broadband RFI discussion with us today. Each of you, as the commissioners have said, brings a unique perspective and understanding of how broadband affects the residents living and working within your borders. And each of you has a stake in making sure that this funding is used to its full potential. We also understand that making broadband available to everyone that works, lives, and learns in Connecticut is about more than deploying the infrastructure. It's about ensuring that everybody has access to that high-speed connection. Access means that service is both affordable and reliable in our rural areas, our cities, for our businesses, and for our residents. So we're going to be going over some important dates and deadlines, but in case you have to jump off early, please remember that comments in response to the RFI are due on August 26th. And should be emailed to deep.broadband@ct.gov. And we will drop that address into the chat. The information that you provide will be used in conjunction with data being gathered by our partners in the Office of Policy Management's GIS office for mapping, in the Office of Consumer Counsel for their ratepayer advocacy, and the Commission for Education Technology as they continue their work to close the digital divide. Together, we're working to implement the governor's vision and address broadband holistically from the physical infrastructure to the end user experience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our director of our Office of Telecommunications and Broadband, Kevin Pasakich.
Thank you, Vicki. And first of all, let me just ask, I'll take no news as good news, but can you all see the slides okay? You can see the slide. Okay, great. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and a warm welcome to you all. I just want to thank Commissioner Boughton for the opportunity and his team to present here. By way of introduction, again, Kevin Pasakich, new here. I've been with the state now for about 6 months, a little over 6 months in this role. Point of interest and disclosure, prior to coming here, I did work for a municipality in California, deploying in the information technology department, deploying broadband and using developing that city's fiber master plan to enable broadband access and other smart city initiatives. So I will confess, it's worked about 5 years for that city, and probably the most interesting, one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. So I came to love working on behalf of the city, and it's just a privilege to be here with you all. And of course, I'm representing the interests of our governor and the commissioner and so on with these programs here. But your success and what we're talking about here is certainly very important, near and dear to my heart, and certainly endeavoring to enable you to be successful with these programs. So let's talk about some important things first, probably. Most importantly, you might be wondering, where's the money, how much, and when do I get it? So let's at least get one thing out of the way right now in terms of timing perspective. We are talking about today, we're having this municipal webinar speaking about the programs today. We do have a request for information out, as Commissioner Boughton outlined. It's very important, and our Commissioner Dykes did as well, that we get input from you on these programs, which we'll be speaking about. Answers for comments are due on the 26th of this month. At the end of this presentation, which we'll make available to you, there is a resource page where you can get a link to go directly to that RFI, and you can access it there. So when are we going to be starting seeing these programs hit the ground, if you will, or hit the poles or hit the street and resulting in broadband? So the earliest, again, just to outline high level, with the American Rescue Plan capital projects based program, which the state is administering, DEEP is administering, we'll probably see that rolling out late this year, early next, by the time we get awards or proposals and look to do awards. Again, we'll unpack this more shortly. The other big one that we have, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, the BEAD, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, that's got a little bit longer time frame on it. Expect that probably late 2023, early 2024. And again, we'll go through more of these in detail, but just want to give a high-level overview of the major milestones with the two major programs that we're going through. So before we get into the kind of the meat of the matter here, I want to take a moment to, let's just have a conversation about what this term broadband is. What does the word mean? And what are we talking about when we talk broadband and high-speed internet, or internet and fiber and cable, whatever have you? So broadband has really come to mean just a term that is synonymous with high-speed internet access. It's one and the same. So there used to be a much more technical definition for broadband in terms of speeds, but it's really come to mean a functional high-speed internet connection to live and work in today's world. So if you hear high-speed internet, you hear broadband. Broadband is an internet connection. That's really what we're talking about. So, and that can be through wireless or wireline, especially when it gets to what's called the last mile component of this. We'll take a look at this. Just want to draw your attention to the diagram here. Looking to the right, if you will, where you got homes, businesses, wherever you may be that you're accessing the internet. Looks like many of us may be in physical offices or working from home today as we access this webinar. So from your premise that you're in, that connection that gets you to your local internet service provider is called the last mile network, and that connection can be called the last mile connection. So you might hear that term thrown about. That's the last connection, or the link between your local internet service provider, where they provide service, and you. If you're in your home, your business, or on your cell phone, that last mile connection is wireless. If you're in a building, most often that's by either fiber or cable or some type of wired technology. So when we talk about broadband networks, just again, some points of information, that last mile component can be the most expensive piece of the equation in getting that connection from your local ISP, or internet service provider, to every home, business, and premise in your community. So that can be, that's either done on aerially through poles. I've heard that 85 to 90% of the state's infrastructure actually comes in on poles and distributed on poles. It can be underground and conduit. So that's a very significant portion, and it's also a significant portion where the federal programs address is getting that last mile access everywhere to every building, so that everyone can access their local ISP and get internet service. So moving to the center of the diagram, that just pictorial in the middle there, let's take that as your local ISP. When you start talking about local ISP connectivity further upstream or to the backbone, as you move to the left of the diagram, that's often called middle mile network infrastructure. And that is how local ISPs connect to other local ISPs and connect to their internet service providers, where we're buying upstream connections. So middle mile, think of it, you'll hear that term. That's often how networks connect to one another. It's not network to customer connections. That's also a focus of the federal programs, to make sure there's enough middle mile infrastructure to support local broadband service providers and access, and local access. Then as you get up, you might have heard the term internet backbone. That's how the large internet backbone networks connect to one another. countries connect to one another through undersea cables, and generally your middle mile architecture and backbone architecture is all done via fiber. So just points of information for you there. And then when we talk about speeds, how fast is really a workable broadband definition, and how fast is fast enough in today's world? So the FCC uses a couple of definitions. One in particular, right now, there's a definition of being unserved by broadband if you lack access to a speed that gives you access to 25 megabits per second, that's Mbps download, that's from the internet to you, or 3 megabits per second upload, that's you transmitting something up to the internet. So Vicky if she has something for me to review, sends me that, I download it from our team site or whatever, that's me downloading something. If I watch a movie, that's me downloading something from the internet. If I have something, a presentation that I want to send for Vicky's review, whatever the case may be, I send that up. That's an upload transmission as far as the internet is concerned. So when you see these speed nomenclatures, like you see here in the middle paragraph on the left, you see that 100 Mbps down, that's 100 megabits per second. Download is listed first, then there's a slash, and then the upload is listed second. Okay, so that's how speeds are denominated when speaking about internet access. The next definition is that 100/20 or 100 megabits download by 20 megabits upload. That, if you don't have access to that, you're considered underserved. So unserved is lacking access to 25.3, underserved is lacking access to 100/20. So these speed levels are very important when it comes to especially the BEAD program, as we'll get into. And then the last one you see here is Connecticut's goal of 1 gigabits per second down by 100 megabits per second up. So I'll say, coming to the state, we are very fortunate in that the state did pass Public Act 21-159, also known as the Broadband Bill, last year, which gets into and articulates these speeds as a goal of universal access established by Governor Lamont and the legislature. So this is a huge marker and a huge win for the state that we've established these goals, because many will say, if you do research on this, really what speeds are going to be adequate. Forget about what the FCC is calling unserved and underserved, and even the FCC realizes that their definition right now is not workable for today's world and are looking to change that. But really, today's technologies, how we live, work, socialize, communicate in today's world, the speeds that we've articulated as a state goal are really what's going to be much more relevant as we go forward. And you'll see federal programs aligning more towards these level of speed. So let's talk about for a minute here. Give me just 1 second here. Okay. So let's talk about broadband as it relates to towns, cities, and municipalities in your community. Why is broadband important in your city, town, and so on? So broadband is pertinent to everything really that's going to be pertinent to your community surviving and thriving in the age to come, and even today. I will disclose that, again, working for the city I worked in, we applied for Amazon's HQ2. I was part of the team that filled that application out. There was a checkbox. If you didn't have access or could not provide access to 10 gigabits per second symmetric upload and download, as well as if there wasn't a local university nearby and rail access and small airport access and the campus wasn't bikeable, there were 6 or 7 or 10 things maybe on that checkbox. Broadband, 10 gigabits, broadband being one. Don't even bother submitting your application. So you may be seeing that in your cities and towns where just the availability of internet is now pertinent to economic survivability when it comes to future opportunities. Remote learning, I think we've all seen what the pandemic has done and how education has, as on the college level, many courses were online in the first place, but now so much of our learning needs to be done online, and how broadband is significant in your community being able to support that. Telemedicine, don't know about you, but I've had now 2 visits with my doctor virtually. Didn't have to go to a waiting room, sit in a chair for an hour and get exposed to who knows what that somebody else might have had. When the doctor was ready, he simply logged on and did the whole thing remotely. It's just a game changer when it comes to medicine and how medicine will be addressed as we go forward. Working, how many of us are working from home right now or doing this presentation remotely? So smart cities we'll talk about on the next slide, but so much of what you do in cities and towns today is being transformed from formerly non-intelligent or devices that are not connected and doing much with the data that they generate to now having connected devices that are producing data that can be leveraged to improve the level of service to cities and businesses in your communities. So let's look at those a bit more closely here. So again, smart cities, what is that and what are smart devices? Again, these devices are really formerly unconnected devices that either were not generating data, now are able to generate data, and through the Internet of Things and connectivity, you're able to take that data and leverage it. And so smart cities are simply doing that in many shapes or forms. This can take many different forms, as you see here, traffic signals, and give you some examples of the ones we worked on in the city I worked at. Having signal lights timed, so when a public safety vehicle goes through a particular route to respond to some emergency, all traffic lights are timed so that they have green lights, and any intersection that would interfere that would have red lights. Parking meters, where by logging onto an application, where can I find a place to park and how can I pay remotely? You might have heard about waste buckets that are now internet connected to the internet and are able to tell sanitation departments when they're full and also have Wi-Fi access as part of that. Planning and zoning applications moving online and going electronic versus paper. So these are all applications that are happening. Again, security cameras, SCADA systems for water, wastewater, all these type of applications are moving to connectivity again to be able to leverage and manage those systems and the data that they produce. But let's look at, in particular, on the individual level, how broadband impacts quality of life on the individual level of people living in your communities. So this slide here comes directly from the U.S. Department of Health and Social Services, and we look at these categories. Broadband has definitely a direct impact on each of these categories. So we've talked about healthcare access and affordability. If I'm not able to get to a healthcare facility, if I can do my appointment online versus having to travel in, what does that do to the quality of healthcare in your community if you're able to enable that? When you're building out infrastructure, facilities in your towns and cities, what if senior centers and teen centers can have adequate internet access so that someone come in and can connect to loved ones remotely or do homework or search for jobs versus not having that internet access available? Look at how we connect today socially, social media, and again with a pandemic, what does broadband do to enabling social connectivity, basic human connectivity now in terms of how we live and worship and work together? Economic stability, mentioned again, what's happening with just basic requirements of new economy businesses and jobs in terms of needing broadband connectivity as a basis for the way they do work. And then certainly we've seen on education how online connectivity now is part and parcel to part of the way we do education this day and age. So broadband directly has an impact in enabling and enhancing each of these components that make up to a quality of life in the people that are living and working in each of your communities. So let's talk about internet access here now as it relates to the state level and where we are at a baseline here. So right now, as you can see here, are some figures. This is based on data that carriers submit to the FCC and the American Community Survey data from 2020. But 23% of households lack a high-speed internet subscription in the state of Connecticut right now. 36% of low-income households lack that high-speed internet connection. Now, what you can see here, I'm just going to talk about this from a high level. These maps are based on FCC data, and a couple disclaimers about this. This data is submitted by providers to the FCC on a census block level basis. So as a provider, I can submit data that says if I can serve or get broadband to 2 locations within a census block, I can call that entire census block served. So you can even surmise by that it's likely that the data is highly inaccurate and is giving a general overview and doesn't get to anything relative on a location specific basis about truly who is served and underserved in the state. So so you can take this for a high level, 10,000 foot view, if you will. The yellow areas are underserved, the red are unserved. What we do not know right now about the data is whether these adoption figures or subscription figures are due to lack of access of an adequate connection or lack of adoption, somebody subscribing to that available connection. So those are things that we're going to be getting into more specifically as we go forward. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about mapping now because it's very, very important as we go forward to the federal programs that are at hand here, especially the IIJA BEAD program. So there is an effort being undertaken by the Office of Policy and Management per Public Act 21-159 to develop a location-specific broadband map. And this is, again, this was articulated in Public Act 21-59, a huge win for the state in establishing this. Credit our commissioner and those that worked to this, and Vicky as well. This is extremely important that the state develop this map because, one, we need it for accurate understanding of where we have specific broadband issues ourselves, but two, the BEAD program directly ties to location-specific data on broadband availability. And our funding level from that EJB program is also going to be tied directly to the number. There's a base level allocation, which I'll get into, the state will get, but anything over that base level allocation is based on the number of unserved locations in what's called high cost areas in the state. So the good news for you is that OPM, we at DEEP have been working very closely with OPM, as has the Office of Consumer Counsel of the state. We have a lot of resources focused on this. We have a rock star team at OPM to make sure that we are ready with our own location-based fabric and data to be ready to validate the FCC results. And let me stop and say that the FCC themselves are developing new location-specific maps for themselves for the BEAD program. And when those maps are released, we'll be ready to validate those maps and also contest, if need be, what those maps reflect, because it's going to be very pertinent to the ultimately amount of funding that we get. So certainly when we talk about internet access and adoption, you might have heard of the term digital divide. Really, what is that? There are basically haves and have-nots when it comes to internet access. And so the two major components of that, as we've already alluded to slightly, are access. Is there a sustainable internet connection, a viable internet connection, an available internet connection where I am? Do I have access to it? Is there infrastructure within my building that might be preventing me from taking advantage of that connection? And we certainly have a lot of rural areas in the state where just density is an issue and providers are not addressing for one reason or another. And then we have another whole set of type of systemic issues regarding aged infrastructure in our cities, where again, you have that situation where a connection may not be able to be extended through a building to units, for example, in multi-unit dwellings within that building. And then certainly we have the question of adoption. Is the connection affordable? Do I understand the need for that? Do I have a device, and do I understand how to use that device and connect and work and use effectively? So those are all things that we're going to be addressing through the federal programs, especially the BEAD program, as we go forward. So the federal government, especially the Biden-Harris administration, this year has kind of aligned to make life easier with the myriad of federal programs available, some past, some present, aligning everything under what they're calling this Internet for All initiative. And there's a link here to that website you can see in the top right, where you can find information about all of these pertinent programs. So we are going to be talking about specifically the two big ones that impact us. And the first here is that Broadband Equity, Access, and Employment, or BEAD, under the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The second one I will mention is the Digital Equity Act programs. That's also part of the IIJA. The Commission for Educational Technology is spearheading those equity efforts in partnership with DEEP. And then I'm going to jump down to two more. Let me say the third one, the Middle Mile Infrastructure Grant Program. That's also part of IIJA. That is a program that DEEP is not administering. There is the Affordable Connectivity Program. We'll have a slide on this in a moment. This is very important one for your residents. This is a new program that is a change from the Broadband Benefit Program that provides for affordable service plans and subsidies for those that qualify. So this is something we want to get the word out. And again, we'll have a slide on this for you to easily reference. But the next big one that we'll be talking about is the Capital Projects Fund. That's part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And that formulates the basis of one of our programs here in the state. So again, you can go to internetforall.gov and you can read up on these programs and find more information on them right from that one easy website. So here is the ACP, or Affordable Connectivity Program. As I mentioned, this provides for discounts or subsidies for up to $30 a month. And it also, this year, there were at least 15 providers in the state that joined the government with this program and offering service for $30 a month. So you have a net cost of $0 per month for people that qualify. So this is a very easy program to check. It would be great and behoove your residents if you could circulate this program amongst your communities. It's very easy to check and see if you qualify and apply right through the one website here. We've linked here below some resources that give some marketing information about the program, as well as links to apply and check to see if you qualify and apply for the program. So we certainly want to give that a shout out. There's a great benefit here and does go a long way towards addressing the affordability issue for those that need it where access is available. So let's get into, in more detail here, I'm sorry, let me get back on my frame here. Let's get into more detail here a little bit on the Capital Projects Fund program, as this is one of the key programs it's underpinning our state program. So again, this is part of the American Rescue Plan Capital Projects Fund. Be careful not to confuse this with the state and local fiscal recovery funds. So in same vein though, this program was enacted to enable work, health, and education. Connecticut has over almost $142 million in CPF monies. Over $100 million of that has been allocated to broadband related initiatives. The program we'll be speaking about today is DEEP's administration of our program as allocated by the state legislature, and that's about $42 million in that particular program. So just to give you a heads up on the timing of this one is happening earlier. As I mentioned, we could see a state program relative to this program in early next year at the latest. And we have a grant program plan that's been submitted to Treasury, and we're waiting for approval on that. So we'll communicate more as we have it. Just a second here. Okay. Okay, so our program, again, total funding amount is $42.9 million. And you can see here the purpose thankfully was articulated for us by the state legislature, by the governor of the state legislature. And if you go to that objective, this is directly from the bill. It's to invest in low-income, multifamily, curb-to-home, and business broadband infrastructure build-out and underserved area broadband infrastructure grants. So this gets us right at the meat of the problem in our state, which is that last mile connectivity in rural areas and in our cities and towns where we have access issues related to, especially that curb to home part of the infrastructure. So this particular program, again, you see here, we got the dates on the bottom, expect an application period late this year or early next. I will say, and just a point of reference for us, we are tying directly to ARPA CPF program parameters with this. The deadline for that program is all project monies need to be expended by the end of 2026. So we have a little bit of a tighter time frame on this one. Going to the right side of the column, you can see grant type. This will be a competitive grant. It'll be a sub-grantee program administered by DEEP. A matching component is yet to be determined. That Public Act 21-159 did give the DEEP commissioner the leeway to require a match. Part of what we're asking for input on this request for information is where and when we should ask or require that matching requirement. So that's open for input from you. And then you can see here some program priorities which align to either requirements from the ARPA CPF program or encouragements are what you see here. First of all, speed should be 100 megabits per second download by 100 megabits per second upload. We're going to have a preference for the state goal of 1 gig by 100. We certainly want to focus on, per guidance by the state legislature and the governor, on underserved area, particularly in distressed municipalities. We are going to show a preference for fiber optic infrastructure. That's again per program recommendation at the federal level, and a priority for what's called open infrastructure. I'll get into that a little bit more, but that's basically if someone builds a broadband network that is open in some way, shape, or form for other providers to have access to at fair rates and terms, but that gets to allowing for shared use of infrastructure to enable more providers to provide end user services. And affordability is going to be a key component of this program as required by the federal guidelines. And also, here's one to note here, alternate provider arrangements. We'll get into that. But the federal government has realized that alternate providers, not just the incumbent providers, but municipalities, utilities, cooperatives, and the like, have been solving the digital divide and the access equation in many cities and towns throughout the country. And they want to make sure that local municipalities, public sector entities, and partnerships thereof can participate and have a role in these programs. A second here, sorry about that. Okay, so the next big one is the broadband, the BEAD program, as we mentioned. Sorry, just give me 1 sec if you would. Okay, so here's the BEAD program. This is the big one as part of the IIJ Act. 100 million minimum will come to the state as a result of this program. That's our minimum allocation. That's a lot of money, but again, that's got to solve a number of scenarios, as we'll get into in just a minute. So first priority for this is going down to the objective for this particular program is we have to spend this money on unserved locations first. So that's locations, and it is locations lacking access to 25 megabits down by 3 megabits up. Once we've shown that we can address all of unserved locations in the state, then we can proceed to addressing underserved locations, those lacking access to 100 by 20. Once we've done that and shown that we have a plan and can address all of those underserved locations, then we can go to community anchor institutions and ensuring community anchor institutions, that's all of your community service facilities, education, health, government facilities, and so on, have access to 1 gig by 1 gig. So this program, again, will be a competitive sub-grant program. There is a match requirement with this particular program of 25%. So the good news is that matching component can be not just money, but other types of contributions, in-kind contributions of infrastructure, There's again, the guidance has a lot of options here as to what that match can look like, and we'll be defining that as we go forward. So there are, the federal government took many steps further on many of the key program parameters here, in that a lot of the things that they encouraged in ARPA CPF have now become requirements with the BEAD program. So let's talk about end-to-end fiber. We talked about a prioritization of fiber optic infrastructure. In this particular program, it stipulates that end-to-end fiber projects are a priority. The reason this was done is that the government realized and articulated in this program that fiber is the most scalable means of last mile access and of supporting speeds that are needed today, but also of future-proofing infrastructure for speeds that are going to be needed tomorrow. So if there is a project that is defined where solution A has fiber end-to-end, solution B does not, we're required to prioritize that fiber-based solution. Alternate service providers, the requirement, there's a lot in here now that we need to foster the participation of alternate service provider arrangements that I mentioned earlier. Again, this is where municipalities, towns, and cities may come into play in partnering with internet service providers or providing solutions directly. This program goes as far as to say, if there is, again, let's take a like project, and solution A is proposed by an alternate service provider of some type, solution B is proposed by an incumbent, and we pick the one from the incumbent, we have to articulate to the NTIA who's administering this program why we did not select the alternate service provider arrangement. So that's how explicit it gets. Certainly, open access, again, is now required as part of this program. Any project awards need to be open to fair access by other providers. Affordability is also a component here, and now you have some other soft requirements, if you will, on workforce readiness and participation, fair labor practices, a lot on stakeholder engagement in terms of local coordination. So just so you know, you can expect a lot of communication from DEEP as we move forward with these programs. And our initial proposal and eventually final proposal are open to review and input before they're submitted. So there'll be a lot of communication that'll be forthcoming with this one. So there are some key themes and priorities that I want to highlight for you here. Certainly with these programs, the two big ones, again, the American Rescue Plan's capital project, the state program out of ARPA CPF, and the BEAD program that will be forthcoming. Universal coverage, we've talked about that. BEAD requires getting everyone at least to a served status. Community engagement, having full participation. Affordability is a major component with both of these programs. Opening the access to make sure that we have participation of adequate providers and more providers to solve the access part of the equation. Another component here is really resiliency and reliability. Is the connection available? Not just that, but what happens if there's a service outage, or how can we best make sure that we're deploying networks that are able to be supported in the event of an outage or with climate impacts. Preference for fiber, we've talked about that. Encouraged with ARPA CPF, now required with the BEAD program. And then certainly alternate provider arrangements. And some of those are listed here. Broadband networks owned by, operated by, or affiliated with local governments, such as yourselves, nonprofits and cooperatives. So all of these things, though, we do ask for input on the request for information through our RFI. And that is the big intent why we want to release this RFI. Certainly one is to engage everyone, make sure all of our towns and cities and all of our broadband stakeholders have a chance to weigh in on these important facets of these programs. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard. Secondly, we want to give a formal process and vehicle for you to have input on and for us to receive input. There are many that have reached out through phone calls or emails advocating for a position on some of these topics, but this RFI will give you that chance to submit this formal input if there's a position that's important to you, to stake out that position, or there's valuable input you'd like to submit, for us to receive that. All the comments we get back through the RFI will be posted for public viewing. And then certainly there are several things that we're going to need to decide on as we go forward, which again are discussed in the RFI. how should the state make decisions on when and where we spend money with the ARPA capital projects versus waiting for the BEAD program. So your input will ultimately guide the direction we take in our strategy in executing on these programs to the benefit of our state. So this is certainly the opportunity to have a say and an input on ultimately how we do. So I want to spend a minute here now and transition a bit to talking a little bit more about the alternate provider participation and what that looks like, especially in the case of municipal networks. A lot of our cities and towns are considering municipal networks. Some cities and towns have them already. DEEP has been studying muni networks in our state and in other states as a means of preparing for our program and programs as they go forward. So here is the language again that's referenced from the capital projects on the lower part of the slide and the requirements on the upper part of the slide here from the BEAD program, as well as I just want to highlight, bring your attention to the box here that the BEAD program goes as far as to say that we have an obligation, the state does, in participating in the program. If there's any laws or policies that would prohibit the participation of public sector entities, we need to do our best to either waive those or at least disclose those to the NTIA. So that's how far the government is going to make sure that there is equitable participation of all provider types in these programs, including municipal networks. So let's take a look at those muni networks in a bit more detail. Certainly, the benefits of considering a municipal network either directly or through a partnership with another provider, sometimes called a public-private partnership. You might have heard that term. There's many cities and towns throughout the country that are going this direction. I will tell you there's no less than 20 municipal networks in Massachusetts. We've spoken to many of those. We have at least a few here in Connecticut, Manchester, Connecticut, Bristol, Connecticut are two that I'll mention that we've spoken to. Let me say here too that we have some contact information. Two of the networks in Massachusetts, as well as Manchester and Bristol, have agreed to make themselves available for conversations with any of you to talk about their experience in the municipal networks and how that might help you in wading through what you might consider in that realm. So their contact information will be in a slide here just a little bit later on. So there are lots of benefits, certainly being able to have control over your destiny in terms of what happens in your municipality, being able to directly have an effect on solving the access equation, solving the adoption equation, and fostering the developments and the social impacts for broadband that we alluded to and went through earlier directly for your community. There certainly are challenges and risks to this. There are many models of ownership, one, and operation, two, that you need to wade through and consider. We'll look at a couple of those models in a minute on a couple of slides here, but that's certainly a pertinent question in terms of where you would stand on owning something, partnering with another provider or entity, and then how that network is operated. So let me say here also too that the Office of Consumer Counsel at the state has been willing to make themselves available to help you wade through some of these questions as well. So I've listed some of the other risks and certainly things to consider. Should you consider looking at a municipal network option? And again, more detail certainly can be had on these points, but certainly does it pay back? And again, the contacts we've listed for you will help here in terms of what the time frame is to having that pay back, adoption rates being what you're expecting, and then certainly incumbent providers have concerns about those moving into their territories and have certainly lined up in many cases against municipal networks. But again, these are required as part of the programs, especially the BEAD program. Certainly DEEP's role in this is going to be finding the best solutions per program parameters and per your input as we move forward. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these here, but these are more for your reference in terms of models that are articulated and touched on somewhat in the program especially the BEAD program, and you can find research on, and that you might want to consider and weigh through as you consider. So many cities will take just a passive type of stance where someone else will come in and build that network entirely for them. Others will have a model where they'll build the network and lease that out in some way, shape, or form to providers or operators. And then other cities have taken the role of just building it and operating that network and being the broadband service provider. So there's realms of ownership and operation, and certainly responsibilities that relate depending on where in the spectrum you might consider to fall. So this is just a resource to consider through some of those things. And certainly, there's certainly risks inherent with each of those models that you might want to take. And certainly, the control and risk continuum varies as you move from a complete wholesale or outsourced model to a completely owned and operated model. So again, this is just a resource to walk through and help you think about some of those pertinent questions as you consider options that you might want to look into. So we talked about, we mentioned the public-private partnership, or P3 type of arrangement. So partnerships can take many forms. I will say here that the federal programs do allow for public-private partnerships. They encourage them. Part of what we get into with the RFI is, again, asking about what type of partnerships might be advantageous to the state in defining programs and where they might be best beneficial. So again, talking about a joint construction partnership, or talking about where the state constructs and another entity would operate. Building an open access network, where again, that's more the wholesale model, where a municipality would build something and lease to providers in some way, shape, or form, through just making dark fiber available or conduit itself available. And then again, getting to the management contract, that can be, again, someone building, a municipality building that network, and just simply outsourcing the operations and service provider aspects of that network to another partner. So just some things to consider and wade through as you move forward. So I did want to highlight here, again, just the open access concept for you. And again, that can take many ways, shapes, or form. Think of it again simply as one provider building a network in some way, shape, or form and opening up that access. It could be last mile access is opened up through, if you take a fiber network build out as an example, if there's conduit run through a particular town or city, that conduit may be a 4-inch conduit that's got space to lease out to providers that want to access that conduit. You may run a 144 strand fiber bundle through there, and you only need 12 strands. You want to lease out 12 or the rest of those strands, however that may take. It can take many forms, but again, open access, open architecture is a requirement of the BEAD program for funded projects under that program. So this is something that is available to you as a resource as you consider moving forward. And one thing we will point out, again, kudos to our state, the foresight of our state legislature and governor, that there is, municipalities have access to a municipal gain or communications conduit through 16233. This is available to municipalities now for their use, as well as DOT, public safety, and so on. And you can read the statute for more information on that. So some vehicles available should you consider moving forward in this realm. So as I mentioned earlier, I did want to highlight 4 networks in particular that DEEP has spoken with, amongst many, and these entities have made themselves available for you if you'd like to have conversations. These entities have built networks that are successfully operating today. So we'll mention Bristol and Manchester right here in the state of Connecticut. Mention 2 others in Massachusetts, Leverett, Mass, and Shutesbury, Mass, that are, again, among 20, possibly up to 25 municipal networks operating in that state. But here are 2 resources for you if you'd like to get more information on how things have gone in that realm for them. So next steps at a high level is 1, please submit your RFI comments by Friday, August 26th at 4:30 p.m. There's a link right here for the RFI. Everything that we've covered in this program, all the particulars I've touched on and more are open for comment in the request for information. So this is, again, we're simply asking for input to help us formulate, finalize, and guide strategy and execution on these programs. We are interested in doing this, executing extremely well, and knocking it out of the park, so to speak, with these programs, and ensuring that we reach that goal of universal access to broadband in our state. We're after that state goal of one gig by 100 down, certainly a minimum. We want to make sure everyone in the state gets served at the end of the BEAD program. So that's we want your input on how best to do that and formulate the programs as we go forward. So we will be keeping you updated. I've referenced here the portal, DEEP's portal, as we start to list the funding availabilities for the programs via these federal programs. We will also be communicating with you as we go forward. And then lastly, here is our email address, which you can use. And as we move forward and start to do listserv communications, that there's an opportunity for you to sign up for that there. And finally, here's a list of resources available to you that may be helpful as you start to wade through the federal programs and all the information thereabouts and thereof. So, and with that, I'll turn it back to Commissioner Boughton and to see if anybody has questions or comments on what we've covered here.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Really comprehensive approach to this. It's a lot. We know we're throwing a lot at you, but we'll get the deck out to you too, so you can sift through it with your teams in your own municipality. Commissioner Dykes is still on, so is the team from DEEP. So if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or criticisms, we'd love to hear them now. And I'll pitch it right over to Kevin or to the relevant person that could answer the question. You can type them in, or you can just raise your hand. So let's see here. I got somebody up here, but you know, these teams here, once you get more than this. Whoever's got their hand up, go right ahead.
It looks like Dean Mack is the first to go, Commissioner.
Thanks, Steve. Dean Mack, what do you got?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the presentation, Kevin. Really detailed and appreciate that. I just had a quick question about the CCM and OPM survey that just closed up at the end of August or at the end of July. The city of New Haven did, we've found that we have a real lack of information, and that this survey was a really important effort by the state, and really appreciated that it was thought of and attempted. But we have some concerns about our ability to get the survey out in time. One of the big things that we've realized is that we think that we're really lacking information about unserved and underserved folks in MDUs in the city, and mostly those are folks in low-income neighborhoods who are difficult to reach at times, especially if they don't have internet service. So we blasted the survey out on our social media channels. We put it out to the library. We created actually our own flyer here in New Haven in order to market it as well as we could, and partnered with Yale New Haven Hospital. They got the word out a little bit, but we still feel like there wasn't really enough time to do the real in-depth type of survey work we would maybe need to do, go out to festivals and churches and community groups and things like that. So wondering if there's any chance of maybe expanding the amount of time that survey, sort of reopening it potentially. The city of New Haven could do our own effort and maybe just put that information up to the state, if that's another option. And if that is, was wondering if we could maybe get some guidance on how to structure a local survey to provide the information that would actually be able to be useful in a remapping effort. So that's really what I'm focused on with this question, just the survey.
Great question. Kevin, you want to maybe take a tackle at that?
Thanks, Dean. So I actually just heard from David Lukens here, who's leading the efforts on the GIS team. So apparently the survey, the CCM survey, is still open, and apparently will be open through the end of August.
Okay.
Yeah, so keep promoting that. There's a lot of efforts that are going on. So also, I should draw your attention to, I did not, but the second bullet here on the resources page here, the broadbandmaps.ct.gov, that is also open, where anyone can directly input issues on their broadband internet service. So this is a resource that's available today. When you peruse that, you can go directly to a link, and I've tested this out and reported an issue on my broadband service at home. So that is available as well. So OPM is capturing data directly through broadbandmaps.ct.gov in addition to the CCM survey that's in play. And if I can, let me just address the issue, Dean, that you're bringing up. We are well aware of issues with multi-unit dwellings or multi-dwelling units, however you say them, in various cities and towns in the state. We're working very closely with FCC. I want to credit the Office of Consumer Counsel, working in partnership with us. We are in direct communication on the highest levels of the FCC with our OPM team to make sure that we are addressing and making sure that we've got accurate fabric for all the residences in our MDUs, and making sure that we can codify the status of each unit in every MDU as far as served unserved status. So we are right on that. And as you said, Dean, is extremely important to understanding the true nature of served and underserved in our state.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Great. Any
Kevin, we
other
have some-
questions?
Commissioner, we have two in the chat from John. First is, who is supposed to fill out the RFI, municipality, local broadband commission? And then the second is, do we have any updates on local ISPs, internet service providers, regarding their service area, such as Optimum? So flip it over to the team.
Ricky, do you want me to take that, or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as far as
go ahead.
filling out the RFI, I think, that's up to the municipality. But as far as if they want to, who they want to designate to fill out the RFI on their behalf, but other entities are welcome to fill it out as well. So this is not just for municipalities, providers, networks, collaborations. This is really open, and we really want to hear from everybody about potential business models you may want to propose in an eventual RFP and things of that nature. So open to everyone.
And on the
Good
carrier
question.
data, again, I'm going to reference that Public Act 21-159 and the foresight that went into it. So part of that act required providers to submit location-based data to OPM, or submit data to OPM per OPM specification, which is location-based data. So that was just again, extremely good foresight. So OPM has requested location-specific data from carriers operating in the state. Those submissions have been made. OPM is working through parsing that data and mapping it. So as they can release that data, it will be posted on the portal, broadbandmaps.ct.gov. So that's the best place to stay tuned for data, for service data from your carrier specifically in an area. As we can post that, as OPM gets through it and is able to post it, you'll be able to find it there.
Okay. Steve, any other questions?
I'm not seeing any hands up or anything in the chat at this time, Commissioner.
Great. Well, I'm going to throw it open.
I'll
to
just
Commissioner
chime
Seif.
in here if I may,
Commissioner.
Commissioner, just to say, listen, just a word on RFIs. We are, don't let that acronym kind of scare you or make it sound like some kind of super technical, like filling out your taxes or, going for a root canal. RFI is just our fancy bureaucratic way of saying we're trying to get input. To hear about, there's some specific questions we've asked for input on, but think of the RFI as, could be simply a place to send us a letter and tell us what's on your mind, or what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in your municipality, or how are you collaborating on these issues? Are there, through your COG or with other providers in your area, or what are the particularly, what's your vision of the problem that you want to tackle, or what resources are you struggling with? Just put it on a cocktail napkin, send it in to us, send an email. This is intended to be, we're just trying to get input to understand who's out there, who's as excited about broadband as we are. And who are the potential partners that we can work with, and what are, as what's our North Star? We want to make sure that we're orienting these funds and deploying them in a way that's going to support you and make sure that our goals are aligned. So, that's just my pitch to say, don't get overwhelmed by the acronym. And if you showed up to this webinar and stayed with us for an hour and 10 minutes, chances are you have something to say, or some expectations for how we can make this work. And so just taking a minute and sending us those comments after today's webinar, or even just questions that you may have. I still don't understand how this is going to work, or have you thought about that? That's what we're trying to do here. This is a major undertaking, and we're taking this extra time at the beginning to make sure, for this first of a kind program for Connecticut, that we're going to make it work for you. So that's the pitch, and I believe we've recorded all of this, so we'll be able to share, right, this webinar
Yes.
with folks.
Correct.
We'll post it on the website. And I know that I see Sam has a comment in there with respect to COGS. In so many different areas, we are happy to be working with municipal CEOs directly and with COGS, who are coordinating and aggregating some of the efforts at the regional level. So you may want to, for the leaders of COGS who are on today's call, you may want to, respond with some specific comments to the RFI. But also, I would just say, in addition to the RFI, if you are hosting, future meetings of your COGS and would like us to come back and, be on your agenda and to have a more regionally tailored conversation, or to be able to answer questions for folks who weren't able to come today, or to provide updates, we always appreciate those invitations. We know how important those meetings are to share ideas and get kind of more locally specific, information about what folks are working together on. So we're very flexible and also appreciative of the role that COGS can play to help facilitate the work for, very busy municipal executives.
Thank you, Commissioner. Rick Genovese?
Yeah, hi, Rick Genovese with the City of New London. Thank you very much for this presentation, because it actually cleared up a few of our questions and has given us resources to find answers for our other questions. I just wanted to note that I tried to download the RFI template and it's corrupted and won't let me do it. I mean, I could download the PDF, but it would be really nice if I could get the template. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll take a look at that, and we can, if you want to drop your email into the chat, we'll also email you a copy.
For some reason, I can't see chat, so I can't do that.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Dean Mack, you have a follow-up?
Hi, sorry, just a different question, actually. Just wondering whether any of the funding, if there's any plan right now for the state funding to be utilized for programs that are more supportive for the digital divide, so things like devices or educational programs, resources that could be deployed into neighborhoods to educate people on the ACP program, for example, or how to improve their Wi-Fi quality, things like that, that would be able to support and not just be the infrastructure side of providing broadband and making sure people actually have access to it.
I can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, Kevin.
Or Commissioner, I'm sorry, let me defer to you if you want to address that at a high level. Commissioner Broughton, did you want to? Okay, so Dean, on that, great question. Let me just say, first of all, with you have the Digital Equity Act programs, which are being led by the Commission for Educational Technology. We'll be working in partnership with the Commission on that act and on those programs. So a lot of that there'll be some cross-pollination there, and a lot of the equity and adoption issues will be addressed on the equity side. The BEAD program does explicitly say, even though it's equity, access, and deployment, the first priority with that is ensuring that you've got to have that plan to address all unserved first, the access issue, ensuring that that's mitigated, and then underserved before you go to other types of spend with that program. That all said, we're going to be allocating as much as we can for the other types of adoption issues within program parameters as soon as we meet those goals. The ARPA CPF does have allowance for devices, as you've said. The state thankfully does have some other programs through ARPA CPF, Wi-Fi and devices that others are managing, but that is an option where, again, we love your suggestions on the prioritization of those funds through the RFI as well.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Any additional questions or commentary? I'm not seeing any so far.
Yep, I don't see any either. So, okay, we're going to wrap up here. I want to thank Kevin, Victoria, and of course, Commissioner Dykes, and of course, for Deep's vision and helping us, the state of Connecticut, put together a really comprehensive approach towards the deployment of broadband in the state. It is complicated, and these folks are just slaying it every day doing this stuff. So we appreciate them and what they're doing. If you have questions too, we can always help point you in the right direction over at Deep or any other agency. You can always contact Steve, Taylor, or myself. But once again, thanks everybody for being on. Not the first call we'll have. There'll be many after this. So keep up the great work. And again, thanks everybody for your participation.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.